It's been a few days since the hyperinflation cycle of Luna started, and it looks like we might finally have a viable recovery plan for the Terra Luna ecosystem. Less than an hour ago, Dokwan put an extensive post on the Terra forums. This proposal includes an airdrop to go to a lot of stakeholders in the Terra Luna community. And even though the 7-day price of Luna has still cratered, you can see that there was a small bump in the declining price of the Terra token as soon as this news was announced. In this video, I'm going to catch you up to speed on the events of the last few days and then go through this proposal in depth and let you know who's actually going to receive this airdrop, as well as if I think it can actually revive the Terra Luna ecosystem. If you want to stay up to date on all the crypto news, and if you want to deepen your knowledge about crypto, this is the channel for you. Hit subscribe to get my future updates about Terra Luna. So jumping into the update, Dokwan broke his silence again on May 14th with a Twitter thread. He says he's heartbroken about the pain that he has caused Luna holders, and then comes out with this key tweet. I still believe that decentralized economies deserve decentralized money, but it is clear that UST in its current form will not be that money. This is important because it's admitting defeat of the UST token, and basically gives up any hope that UST will return to its peg, which we'll see in the plan that he released 2 days later. He goes on to say that he did not profit from the UST collapse, and he did not sell any of his Luna or UST during the crisis, which was probably worth billions of dollars. He then plugs a Terra Ecosystem revival plan that was posted to the Terra forums. Note that this is not the most recent plan, but it was a plan posted a few days ago. Here he talks about some of the things that Terra Luna still has, including its community and its developers, which I did talk about in my last video. He proposes resetting Luna to 1 billion tokens and distributing it in the following ways. 40% to Luna holders before the depegging event, 40% to UST holders, 40% to UST holders at the time of the new network upgrade, which means people who are still holding onto their UST, and 100 million, just 10% to the Luna holders at the final chain halt. These are the people that either held onto their Luna or scooped up Luna as the price cratered. There was some mixed feedback on the proposal, but one outcome was a new proposal by Fatman, who's a regular on the Terra Luna forums. Fatman's proposal was the idea that we would repay UST holders 1-to-1, starting with the smallest wallets first. This would be because the richest UST wallets held a good portion of the tokens. And so starting with the smallest wallets first, you would be able to make the most number of people whole. Also, he says it would greatly improve general morale, which is true if the community is the only thing you have. It's important to make those people happy, or at least not leave them with a resentment towards Terra Luna. He also mentions that with only 1 or 1.5 billion funds, the majority of users can be made 100% whole again. The problem is, at this time, we didn't know how much the LFG Reserves still had left. After getting some feedback on this generally widely accepted proposal, he made a few changes. First, that only initial deposits into Anchor would be refunded, not the yield earned from Anchor, which makes sense because that's not money that the users actually lost. Then that all forms of UST on Terra would count, and then instead of targeting just small wallets first, they would pay out all wallets up to a certain cap. This would basically have the same effect of paying out the small wallets first, because the richest wallets are a small percentage of overall wallets. But it does at least provide a more equitable solution, especially in the case where somebody might have had their life savings inside of Anchor, which was above the threshold cutoff for the wallet. At least they get the same amount back that everyone else is getting. Vitalik, who's the co-founder of Ethereum and someone who I personally have a lot of respect for, says he strongly supported this proposal, saying that it provided sympathy and relief for the average UST holder and expecting personal responsibility for the wealthy. But this proposal was based on the assumption that there was 1 to 1.5 billion left in the LFG reserves. And as it turns out, that's definitely not the case. LFG published a tweet thread talking about the reserves that they started with and the reserves that they ended with. Their starting amount on May 7th was worth around $3 billion. Then as the peg broke, they traded these to buy UST to try and preserve the peg. When UST finally fell to 75 cents, they made one last-ditch effort. They sold over 33,000 Bitcoin to buy $1 billion worth of UST. As we all know, this effort was in vain and UST still collapsed. The Luna Foundation Guard was left with just 300 Bitcoin, 39,000 BNB, 2 million AVAX, and now they have 1.8 billion in UST, as well as over 200 million Luna tokens. If you do the math, this means that they started out with around $3 billion worth of assets and are left with just 80 million after the peg breaking. They do say that they're planning on using this remaining 80 million to compensate the holders of UST, starting with the smallest. But they're still debating on the various distribution methods. Of course, going back to that proposal, it looks like a lot less people than expected will actually be made whole from their UST deposits. But all hope is not lost because there could still be a future for the Terra ecosystem. Just recently, Dokwan put out another tweet thread, this time talking about an updated plan for the Luna token, the UST token, and the Terra ecosystem. And it looks likely that this could be the plan that eventually comes to reality. He starts out by saying Terra is more than UST, and then puts forth the Terra Ecosystem Revival Plan 2. In this plan, they would fork the Terra chain into a new chain without UST. They'd call the current chain Terra Classic and the current Luna token Luna Classic, and then move those names, Terra and Luna, into the new chain. Then, similar to that first recovery proposal, they would airdrop this Luna token to Luna Classic stakers, holders, UST holders, and app developers of Terra Classic. It is worth noting that a huge portion of the UST and the remaining Luna is held by LFG, as they just published on Twitter. So this probably means that they would get a sizable airdrop of this new Luna token. But in this proposal, they do say that Terraform Labs, which was the central organization behind the creation of the Terra ecosystem, would be removed from the whitelist for the airdrop. This proposal also makes space for a large proportion of the token distribution to go to dApp developers. This is important because dApp developers likely had their reserves in UST. So it's as if you had a company with a war chest that all of a sudden went to zero. They then say that this will be a proof of stake chain with a target staking rewards for your Luna of 7%. Again, similar to the proposal a few days ago, there would be 1 billion Luna tokens distributed. 25% would go to a community pool, which would be a war chest for the ecosystem. This would be controlled by everyone who held Luna tokens. So while I'm sure that Dokwan and Terraform Labs would still control a lot of power, this would be slightly less power for them and more power to the community. They would then give 1% to these developers with no lockup and 4% to these developers with a lockup to incentivize them staying with the Terra ecosystem. The largest percentage of this airdrop will go to Luna holders that happened before the attack snapshot. This pre-attack snapshot means that if you scooped up a bunch of Luna at the final prices, unfortunately you would be excluded from this allocation. It's also worth noting that in this proposal, they have a 1-year cliff and a 2-year vesting for smaller Luna holders. If I'm reading this right, this means that no one will get any Luna tokens until 1 year. Then those smaller holders will have half of their new airdropped tokens unlocked, and the rest will vest over the period of the next year. For the whales with greater than 1 million Luna in their balance before the attack, which I'm sure include Dokwan and LFG, they get 1/4 of their tokens after a year, and then the next vest after the next 3 years. So then the 10% Luna allocation is the one that everyone who bought Luna tokens would be happy about, because this includes all Luna holders at the launch of the new forked chain. They would initially get 10% of those tokens and then 90% vested over the next 2 years. And finally, there's a good portion allocated, 25%, to UST holders at the launch of this new chain. Overall, it seems like this proposal might actually let Terra Luna survive. I still wonder what stablecoin will take the place of UST because almost every app in the Terra ecosystem was built around having a stablecoin. The idea of splitting up the allocations to people who held before the attack and then a smaller allocation for those who bought tokens at a lower price seems to make sense to me, because those holders before were the ones that were really invested in the Terra ecosystem. And it's likely that a lot of people fell into both buckets. Dokwan also said in his Twitter replies that they're working with major exchanges to include those who held Luna in the airdrop, with the plan that it will be launched just 10 days from now. Only time will tell if this launch will regain some of the value that was created by the Terra ecosystem. And if you want updates, again hit subscribe because I'm going to be following this closely. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.